Men over 50, top 7 fruits that naturally fire up testosterone and intimacy. Gentlemen, let's be honest. How many times have you heard that after 50, your best days are behind you? That low energy, a fading sex drive, and a stubborn belly are just part of aging? Well, I'm here to tell you that's only half the truth. Yes, testosterone declines with age, but the idea that you have no control over it, that's the myth. And I'll show you how something as simple as what's sitting in your fruit bowl can flip the script on your health, your vitality, and even your performance in the bedroom. Now, some people roll their eyes when they hear food can boost hormones. Doc, you expect me to believe bananas or grapes can do what prescriptions do? And my answer is simple. The science doesn't lie. I've seen it in clinical studies, I've seen it in my patients, and I've seen it in my own life. These everyday fruits pack nutrients that help your body fire up testosterone, improve blood flow, and reignite intimacy, without side effects, without gimmicks. Surprised? Good, you should be. Before we dive in, let me pause for one quick thing. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. It gives us the fuel to keep bringing you powerful, science-based tips for men's health that you won't hear anywhere else. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 7 fruits. Yes, just 7. That could change how you feel, how you move, and how you connect with your partner. Trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you'll never look at your grocery cart the same way again. Why testosterone declines after 50, and why it matters. Once a man reaches his 30s, testosterone begins to decline at about 1% every year. In the early years, you may not notice much, but as you move through your 50s and beyond, the changes become more obvious. Muscle gives way to fat around the belly, bones lose strength, energy dips, and the drive that once felt natural, both in daily life and in the bedroom, starts to fade. Many men also experience mood swings, brain fog, or even depression, and they often blame it all on just getting older. The truth is, testosterone is about far more than intimacy. It is a survival hormone that helps regulate blood sugar, protect the heart, preserve muscle and bone, and even keep the brain sharp. When levels drop too low, the risks rise quickly. Research has shown that low testosterone doubles the chance of developing type 2 diabetes, increases the likelihood of heart disease, and accelerates cognitive decline. A 2018 study published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society reported that men over 60 with low testosterone were 40% more likely to lose independence in basic daily activities within 5 years. And other studies link low testosterone to weaker memory and slower thinking. This often leaves men asking if testosterone replacement therapy is the only answer. While it can be helpful in some cases, it isn't a cure-all. It carries risks, requires close monitoring, and doesn't fix the root of the problem. The truth is, your body hasn't lost the ability to produce testosterone. It just needs the right conditions to do its job. Food, movement, sleep, and stress control all play a direct role in hormone health. Nutrients like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, healthy fats, and antioxidants are the raw materials your body needs to support testosterone production. Combine these with strength training, quality rest, and a lifestyle that lowers stress, and you can create the right environment to restore energy, drive, and focus. The good news is that some of the most effective tools are simple, everyday foods you probably already know. In the next chapters, we'll take a closer look at 7 specific fruits that research shows can naturally help men over 50 boost testosterone and reclaim vitality, without pills, shots, or gimmicks. Fruit number 7, bananas, the dopamine and bromelain boost. Bananas might seem ordinary, but they hold powerful benefits for men over 50 when it comes to testosterone and intimacy. They are rich in vitamin B6, a nutrient that supports the production of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that elevates mood and also plays a direct role in sexual arousal and motivation. Bananas also provide bromelain, an enzyme shown in several studies to support healthy testosterone levels and improve sperm quality. A paper published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology noted that bromelain supplementation helped preserve testosterone levels even in men under physical stress, suggesting that this humble fruit can act as a natural hormonal stabilizer. As a physician who has worked with older men for decades, I've seen how small, consistent dietary changes can create meaningful results. One patient I'll never forget was Mark, age 62. He came into my clinic feeling exhausted and disconnected, convinced that aging had taken away his energy for good. His diet leaned heavily on processed foods with very little fresh produce. We started with something simple: 2 bananas a day, 1 at breakfast and 1 as an afternoon snack, along with a few other adjustments. Within 6 weeks, he reported more steady energy during the day, clearer focus, and yes, his intimacy with his wife had noticeably improved. It wasn't a miracle pill, It was his body finally responding to the right fuel. Bananas are also a great source of potassium and magnesium, minerals that support healthy blood pressure and muscle function. Why does that matter for testosterone? Because good circulation and strong muscles are the foundation for hormone balance and sexual health. In fact, research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that diets rich in potassium and magnesium were associated with better cardiovascular health, which directly supports testosterone production and erectile function. The beauty of bananas is how easy they are to add to your routine. They fit naturally into breakfast, smoothies, or even as a simple grab-and-go snack. But here's the key. Don't just think of them as calories. Think of them as tools. Each banana you eat is supporting dopamine, balancing your hormones, and improving circulation. So let me ask you this. If something as simple as reaching for a banana instead of a processed snack could restore some of your energy, lift your mood, and even strengthen your intimacy, isn't that worth trying? Sometimes the difference between decline and vitality isn't found in a prescription. It's sitting right there in the fruit aisle. Fruit number 6, grapes, the blood flow enhancer. Red and black grapes are far more than a sweet snack. They contain resveratrol, a compound concentrated in the skin that stimulates nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide relaxes blood vessels, allowing them to open wider, which improves circulation throughout the body. For a man over 50, that means stronger heart health, more stamina, and better performance in intimate moments. A study from Korea in 2012 showed that men who ate grapes regularly had not only better sperm motility, but also higher testosterone levels. This happens because antioxidants in grapes protect the Leydig cells in the testes, the very cells responsible for making testosterone, while improved blood flow ensures those hormones can reach the muscles, brain, and reproductive system where they're needed most. Science continues to support this connection. Research in the Journal of Sexual Medicine has shown that men with better endothelial function, the ability of blood vessels to dilate properly, report stronger sexual performance, and resveratrol plays a big role in keeping those vessels healthy. Another study from the University of Illinois suggested that diets high in flavonoid-rich fruits like grapes were associated with a lower risk of erectile dysfunction, particularly in older men. This isn't just about intimacy either. Good circulation improves oxygen delivery to muscles, which means more endurance when exercising or even something as simple as walking up the stairs. From my own experience as a physician, I've seen patients transform small changes into big results. One gentleman in his late 60s, who struggled with fatigue and poor circulation, began adding a cup of red grapes to his lunch every day. Within a few months, he noticed not only that his workouts felt easier, but his blood pressure had improved, and his energy at night was returning. These kinds of improvements don't come from drastic measures, they come from consistency. So here's something worth asking yourself. If a handful of grapes can quietly strengthen your heart, sharpen your performance, and protect the very cells that make testosterone, why not let them become part of your daily routine? Sometimes the simplest foods carry the biggest benefits, especially when eaten with purpose. Fruit number 5, pomegranates, the ancient symbol of vitality. Pomegranates have carried a reputation as a symbol of fertility and vitality for thousands of years, and modern science confirms that reputation. A 2012 study published in the International Journal of Impotence Research reported that men who drank pomegranate juice daily saw testosterone levels rise by 24% in just 2 weeks. They didn't just show higher hormone levels in the lab. They also reported stronger moods, improved energy, and a noticeable lift in intimacy. The reason is clear. Pomegranates are rich in polyphenols and antioxidants that protect blood vessels, lower oxidative stress, and enhance nitric oxide production. Much like grapes, this boost in nitric oxide improves blood flow, but pomegranates appear to work at an even stronger level. I've seen this play out in practice. Robert, a 68-year-old patient of mine, was beginning to feel like age had finally caught up with him. His energy was low, his workouts felt sluggish, and his relationship with his wife had lost some of its spark. I suggested he start with something simple, half a glass of pomegranate juice with dinner. After 3 months, his strength returned, his endurance in the gym improved, and his wife told me he seemed 10 years younger. These kinds of results aren't rare when men consistently add pomegranates into their diet. Research from the University of Edinburgh also found that daily consumption of pomegranate juice reduced blood pressure and lowered stress hormone levels. Lower stress hormones, particularly cortisol, are critical for testosterone health because excess cortisol directly suppresses testosterone production. In other words, pomegranates don't just build testosterone up, They also protect it from being broken down by the pressures of daily life. Another study published in Clinical Nutrition showed that pomegranate extract improved endothelial function, meaning the inner lining of blood vessels became more responsive, allowing for stronger circulation. From a practical standpoint, adding pomegranate to your routine can be simple. Juice is convenient, but the seeds themselves, called arils, are packed with fiber and can be eaten as a snack, sprinkled on salads, or blended into smoothies. For men who want to avoid extra sugar, a small bowl of seeds may be even better than juice. So here's something worth thinking about. If one fruit could lower stress, improve blood pressure, protect your heart, and raise testosterone all at the same time, wouldn't it be worth finding a place for it in your daily routine? Pomegranates aren't just an ancient symbol. They are a modern tool for staying strong, vibrant, and connected. Fruit number 4, avocados, the hormone helper. Avocados are technically a fruit, and they happen to be one of the best foods a man over 50 can eat for hormone health. Testosterone is synthesized from cholesterol, and avocados provide the right kind of fats, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, that your body needs to build hormones efficiently. Beyond healthy fats, they are packed with vitamin E, potassium, and magnesium, each playing a key role in sexual health, circulation, and hormone balance. A study published in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry found that men who consumed diets higher in monounsaturated fats had significantly higher testosterone levels than those on low-fat diets, underscoring the importance of quality fats for hormone production. Another study from UCLA linked avocado intake with improved vascular health and better blood lipid profiles, which directly support testosterone by keeping blood flow strong and protecting the arteries that deliver nutrients and hormones throughout the body. From my years of practice, I've seen many men make the mistake of cutting fats too aggressively, believing it would help them lose weight or protect their hearts. In reality, avoiding healthy fats often worsens hormone decline and leads to fatigue, poor recovery, and reduced libido. One patient of mine in his early 70s had been on a strict low-fat diet for years. He felt drained, had trouble building muscle, and admitted to a loss of interest in intimacy. Once we reintroduced healthy fats, starting with half an avocado each morning on whole grain toast, his energy levels returned, he regained lean muscle, and his confidence in the bedroom improved within a matter of months. Avocados are also a natural source of antioxidants like lutein, which protect against oxidative stress, another enemy of testosterone. Potassium helps regulate blood pressure, and magnesium supports muscle function and relaxation, both of which are vital for performance and recovery. Unlike processed sources of fat, avocados deliver these benefits in a clean, nutrient-dense package. So the real question becomes this: why fear fat when the right kind can restore strength, improve intimacy, and support your hormones? Adding avocado to your daily meals, whether sliced in a salad, blended into a smoothie, or mashed into guacamole, may be one of the simplest yet most powerful steps a man over 50 can take toward better testosterone and vitality. Fruit number 3, figs, the libido lifters. Figs have carried a reputation as an aphrodisiac since ancient times, and modern science explains why. They are packed with zinc, magnesium, and iron, 3 minerals that are absolutely essential for testosterone production, sperm quality, and overall stamina. Zinc in particular is critical. Studies have shown that men with zinc deficiency can experience testosterone levels drop by as much as 70 to 75%. A trial published in the Nutrition Journal confirmed that restoring zinc intake significantly improved testosterone levels and sexual function in older men. Magnesium, another mineral in figs, supports muscle relaxation, energy production, and healthy sleep, all of which directly influence testosterone. Iron contributes by boosting hemoglobin, allowing more oxygen to circulate through the body and increasing stamina during both physical activity and intimacy. In my practice, I've seen the difference firsthand. Carlos, a 70-year-old patient of mine, used to laugh as he called figs his secret weapon. He added them into his diet in simple ways, chopped into his morning oatmeal, eaten dried as a snack, or enjoyed as a light dessert after dinner. Over time, his energy returned, his testosterone labs improved, and his wife even came along to one of his follow-up visits to thank me for recommending such a simple change. That's the quiet power of consistent nutrition. Scientific evidence continues to support what men like Carlos have experienced. Research from Tufts University found that higher magnesium intake was strongly associated with healthier testosterone levels, especially in older adults. Meanwhile, figs' natural antioxidants protect the Leydig cells in the testes, helping to preserve the very machinery that produces testosterone. Beyond hormone health, the fiber in figs supports digestion and helps maintain a healthy weight, another key factor since excess body fat is strongly linked to lower testosterone. Figs are also incredibly versatile. Fresh figs can be paired with cheese, nuts, or lean meats, while dried figs make for an easy on-the-go snack. Even adding 3 or 4 a few times a week can provide enough minerals to close nutritional gaps. So consider this. If such a simple addition to your diet can restore stamina, protect testosterone, and even strengthen intimacy, why wouldn't you make it a regular part of your routine? Sometimes nature gives us exactly what we need in a form that's as enjoyable as it is effective. Fruit number 2, watermelon, nature's Viagra. Watermelon might seem like nothing more than a refreshing summer snack, but inside this fruit is a natural compound with impressive effects on male vitality. It contains high levels of citrulline, an amino acid that the body converts into arginine, which then boosts nitric oxide. Nitric oxide relaxes blood vessels, improving circulation in the same way that certain prescription medications for erectile support work, only without the side effects. A study from the University of Texas found that citrulline supplementation improved erectile function in men with mild dysfunction, showing measurable results in firmness and satisfaction. What makes watermelon even more appealing is how safe and enjoyable it is. Hydrating, low in calories, rich in antioxidants like lycopene, and naturally sweet. Beyond intimacy, better circulation means better performance in everyday life. Improved blood flow helps deliver oxygen to muscles, increasing exercise endurance and recovery. Research published in the Journal of Urology suggested that citrulline may serve as a natural aid for men with mild erectile issues, while other studies have shown it can reduce muscle soreness and improve workout efficiency. Lycopene, another nutrient concentrated in watermelon, supports prostate health, reduces oxidative stress, and has been linked to a lower risk of certain cancers, including prostate cancer, a concern many men face as they age. I once treated a patient in his mid-60s who struggled with both low energy and mild erectile difficulties. Rather than reaching straight for medication, we focused on natural strategies, including daily servings of watermelon. Within a few months, he noticed not only better intimacy, but also improved stamina during his morning walks and strength sessions at the gym. Sometimes the body doesn't need a prescription. It simply needs the right fuel. Watermelon is also versatile. Fresh slices on a hot day, blended into a smoothie, or even juiced can all deliver the same benefits. For men aiming to boost their circulation naturally, watermelon is one of the simplest options available. And here's the question worth asking. If a fruit as common as watermelon can hydrate your body, support your heart, protect your prostate, and enhance intimacy, why wouldn't you make it a regular part of your diet? Fruit number 1, dates, the ancient tonic for masculinity. Dates have been treasured in Middle Eastern medicine for centuries as a natural way to restore male vitality, and today research helps us understand why. They are rich in antioxidants that protect the testes from oxidative stress, natural sugars that provide quick energy, and bioactive compounds that support hormone balance. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that date fruit extract significantly improved both sperm count and motility in men, pointing to its direct role in reproductive health. Dates also contain flavonoids and plant-based compounds with estradiol-like effects, which help regulate hormones and enhance sexual performance. From my own clinical experience, I've seen how something as simple as adding a few dates to the diet can create real improvements. I often recommend 3 to 4 dates in the evening paired with a handful of nuts, and many patients have reported more energy, deeper sleep, and noticeable improvements in intimacy after just a few weeks. Personally, I follow this same routine and can attest to the benefits. It's a simple practice that blends nourishment with tradition. Science backs this further. Research from Babol University in Iran showed that men who consumed date palm pollen and date extracts experienced higher testosterone levels and better sperm quality, thanks to the fruit's rich antioxidant profile. Another study in andrology confirmed that dates not only improved semen quality, but also reduced markers of oxidative damage, helping preserve the cells in the testes that are responsible for testosterone production. The combination of quick-release natural sugars with minerals like magnesium and potassium also supports stamina, circulation, and recovery after physical activity. Dates are versatile. They can be eaten plain, stuffed with almonds or walnuts for extra nutrients, or blended into smoothies for natural sweetener. For men who struggle with sugar cravings, dates offer a healthier alternative that satisfies the sweet tooth while fueling the body with valuable nutrients. So here's the question worth asking. If one small fruit can protect your testosterone, improve sperm health, restore energy, and even enhance intimacy, why not make it part of your nightly routine? Sometimes the most powerful solutions are also the simplest, and dates have been proving that for thousands of years. So, gentlemen, there you have it. The 7 fruits that science and real-world experience show can help men over 50 fire up testosterone, sharpen energy, and bring intimacy back to life. From the dopamine boost of bananas to the ancient power of dates, each of these foods is proof that nature still has your back. The truth is, you don't need to surrender to age, you just need to give your body the right fuel. Now, let me ask you this. Which of these fruits are you going to add to your routine first? Sometimes the smallest daily habit makes the biggest change, and your future self will thank you for starting today. If you found value in this video, do me a favor, hit that like button, share it with a friend who needs to hear this, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We've got plenty more science-based, no-nonsense tips coming your way to help men over 50 stay strong, sharp, and confident. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, age doesn't define your masculinity, your choices do. Take charge of your health, and I'll see you in the next video.